to talk about Canopy as a few things and what it represents to me, and then hear from you. For me, it's this idea, Doc, that first, and I don't want to super spiritualize this, but God's a protective force. And I want to portray that in an honorable way. I want folk to know that no matter where they are or how they see God, or if they don't see God, I want them to know that there is at least the idea, maybe that is yet undiscovered by them, of a protective force. The other thing I want them to know is that there is a canopy of care that is at least accessible to them at some place. Doc, you and I deal with so many families, so many broken places. There are so many broken churches. There are so many broken things now. It's like my friend to me a few months ago told me, he said, Steve, we're in the breaking business now, not in the building business. And it struck me, Doc. But I want them to know that no matter how broken they are, that the canopy of God, the canopy of care, the canopy of intelligence, the canopy of accessibility, these are not just words to me, Doc. I want them to know that they can find them. And the next thing I want them to know is I want this to become a familiar place for them. And I want it to become a place, and we'll talk about this in a minute, coming back to your space idea. I think of how few places now, Doc, are safe spaces for our children, for our families, for our culture. And I want this to be a safe space that people can run to and cling to and listen to. I have so many other things I want to say, but I want to hear from you on that.
Well, just like the word one triggers me, the word safe space creation. I think it's kind of been watered down. It's been, I'm just going to go ahead and say ruined. As I think, but I do, the idea of that you can listen to concepts, talk about them, maybe be able to find a connection point with them. What I love is that it is the tent, the tabernacle of God. So when you thought of firmament, when I thought of canopy, I thought about the tabernacling of God, God with us, that protective element of the presence of the Lord as a canopy. And even like when the Hebrews left Egypt and God was the canopy over them by fire and by cloud, just was working with some students at a chapel service about the gospel message of Jesus being that I am in the Father is me, and you will be in me. This whole abiding sense that God abides with us. And so, and regardless, I would say regardless of whether or not you are a believer in Jesus at this point, and wouldn't claim to be a Christian, God has what theologians refer to as common grace. There's a grace that everyone participates in, and a graciousness. So it's not as I think both of our understandings of God's presence in the human story is one that's active for those that accept and even those that object. And so I think, I hope we don't just have professing Christians listening or watching what we say. I hope that anybody can and will. I don't want to throw rocks at me or anything, but
no. Let me just kind of put one more piece on that, and then we'll go where you want to go. But the other thing is, Doc, is I thought about the work that we've done, and I thought, not only is this a time when things are breaking, and I know we want to push on, but I want to finish this piece for myself, please. And that is, there are so many people falling from the faith, God, right now, Doc. There's so many people, that are leaving. And so I want the canopy to be able to cover those people that have abandoned or have no longer feel safe or connected, whatever the word you're going to use, inside of a traditional church setting or a religious setting or evangelical setting. And so I want this to have the ability to cover those people because they have families. They need to have some faith, at least some understanding of God. And then we want them to have the mission of what's important to them align with themselves as well. That's important to me, Doc.
Well, there's so much going on. I mean, there have been some people on the kind of, I guess, the head of the pack deconstructing everything.
Yeah.
We're kind of in a cultural phase of deconstruction.
Yeah.
And I believe there's some good work that shows the kind of flows of society, some good sociology that kind of pictures that. And this is one of those cycles of deconstruction. People are deconstructing their theology and they're making a mess of it, to be, if I could be candid with it. They're redesigning it, reshaping it, but only to discover that their deconstruction has left them empty-handed.
Yeah.
But where do they go in the meantime?
Okay.
So, like some of those first deconstructionists, especially the ones that were on the scene of music and worship and teaching, they are beginning to get to the end, and they've realized they're empty-handed, so they have to reconstruct. And some of them are returning back to the faith. And what's interesting is some of them are actually going back to something even more orthodox than they were in initially, more structured.
Wow.
However, that doesn't matter. But I think what goes on with what you're saying is that there's a middle place where they can hold on to bits and pieces that they have taken apart and go, okay, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah, I love that. So let's get into what do we want to do. Our goals are pretty massive, I think, at least on my end. I mean, I have a infinity thing.
They are. They're big.
So let's talk about the first thing, which is we wish to fill in the blank, Doc.
I'm going to use the definition. To be a safe place to discuss difficult and oftentimes vexing topics.
Isn't it the case? Say it again, please.
A safe place to discuss difficult and oftentimes vexing. I love that. Vexing topics.
Is it not the case, Doc, that we live in a time when absolutely people are colliding with things that before 3 years ago, 5 years ago, never were even possible to be thought through? So I think this idea of collision, and I've thought of the word that I would use many times. As you know, we're both linguists, and someone last week asked us how we wordsmith. I thought that was a funny thing because language means so much to both of us. But I thought, how do we describe what we encounter? I've tried really hard. You work really hard. Folks, we work really hard at language to try to find the right term that can connect and not be disbanded or discharged quickly. Doc, the only word that I can really come with right now is collision. So talk a little bit about why people need safe spaces to talk about these difficult and vexing topics. Just, sample what you and I encounter in the course of 5 days. What do we see?
You see overly emotional interactions. So everyone is reacting to what they feel rather than the actual content.
Okay.
Whether it's an idea or what someone said or what someone even believes, people are responding to their own emotion. Everything is kind of so wrapped up in like some emotional appeal. It almost rips away logic, Whereas in Western culture, it used to be the reverse of that.
It did.
Logic was like superior and emotion was like diminished as like secondary and insignificant. Now it appears like it has been reversed and you have to dig through all these emotional stories to get to what's your real point about what is true and what is not true. And so that to me is exhausting. I mean, when I look at social media, it's like emotional story. It's, or look at the presidential State of the Union address. We're going to have to tell 3 stories about somebody named Jane and Smith and blah, 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 and then get to the point. Rather than getting to the point, it's like truth does not have a place to sit its own seat at the table. It all has to be driven by emotion first. So I have to hear all these stories. Now, I understand stories illustrate well,
Yeah.
and it helps us understand maybe the context in which the truth is played out, or it may call into question whether or not that truth is being applied well or not. So I'm not opposed to story. It's just story after story after story, and you lose the point. And then everyone's responding to the emotional. If they're really moved emotionally and they're angered by the story, they're going to respond in anger. If they're weeping because of the story, they're going to respond with compassion, but forget to hold on to the truth, the substance that's in the middle of that. And that's what I see. That's the collision.
Yeah.
I feel like we're being bombarded by emotionalism, and then we innately just respond emotionally. I can, sometimes with compassion, sometimes with my own, self-righteous indignation. But I think that what I want to say too about collisions and discussing things, vexing topics that are difficult, I want to do it with humility, because I am not an expert on all the topics we are going to dip into. There are people on the internet, have their own YouTube channels that are far more, articulate, intelligent, and have systemized their thought in that, and honestly borrowing from some of that. So I think the discussion of difficult topics is sometimes going to be just us saying, this is hard. There's no easy solution to this. This is tough. But there's a tension that we have to figure out how to live with. That dialectical kind of thinking of, okay, wait a minute. How do these two things that appear to be in opposition and really might have some practical opposition to each other, how do they live in tension in such a manner that they actually provide a solid place for us to stand?
Yeah, and without getting into any specific cases, I just think that that's the word I wanted to use. So, at the biggest picture, safe places to talk about tough things.
Right.
That's really our intention, under the canopy of family, faith, mission. That's really what we seek to accomplish. Mm-hmm. Next, please.
With some practical application.
With a lot of practical application.
That's what I think that may be. We have learned a lot from people, but the practical application piece, how does that apply?
That's the secret sauce.
That is the secret sauce.
In my opinion, the thing that you and I bring to the table, and I totally agree. Mm-hmm. I would never put myself on any pedestals. I've been pushed off of too many anthills. But this idea, the sauce, the secret sauce that you and I bring, mm-hmm. is that we work in the laboratory every day. We do this work every single day, and that we face and stare down collisions that really do bring harm on lots of levels, both visible and invisible, and seen and unseen. And then we want to create safe places to talk through those things in ways that people can gain understanding and connection. And now we want to go to the next pieces. So,
but probably the only reason people will really keep watching us is the personality. So, first of all, there's an interesting interplay, synergy between you and I. Whether it's like, this is perfect, this is great. I'm like, yeah, if we make these 6 changes, so there's this kind of play and a freedom with one another to do that.
No doubt.
And I think that is fun. I think it's kind of funny, actually. It's a little bit entertaining.
I do too.
To see that and to allow that to go back and forth.
I love that.
I think you bring distinctly to the table a very thoughtful place, authentic humility.
Thank you.
You're one of the most gracious people I know. And so, I think that's going to I think people enjoy that part of just being able to hear a gracious, thoughtful man.
Huh.
So, I mean, we're not young. We don't have cool haircuts, and they're not going to watch us because we're hip.
Oh, that's interesting, Doc. You said that because people will ask me often about my humility, and it is born of many mistakes, Doc, because there was a day, I think you can see this in me, that I had a very big ego, and God absolutely collapsed that. And I can honestly say, Doc, that when it shows back up, I can quickly put it back in its kennel, because I'm very clear about that my job is to stay in a canopy in relationship with God for the purpose of serving others. So I thank you for that. And in terms of fun, Doc, to me, this is fun. See, that's the point I think that people are missing. I think people are so let me say this, I'm longing for, I look at, I don't want to name any names here, but there's some people, I go to their channels because they're smart, they're intelligent, they're vibrant, they're on point. They have all different skin colors and both sexes and ages, but I like smart, I like on point, I like funny, I like character. I like those things. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that you think that our state that we're bringing those forward. And for you, you bring this dearth, this breath of wisdom, and just, I love when you start, and I'm not flattering you, but I've told you this, I love when you just start riffing on the stuff you know about human healing. I love that. And I want people to get that. I want people to be able to, the thing of peeling back the veneer, I want people to be able to see that so that they can understand that no matter what collision is happening to them, and this is not some spiritual hyperbole, Doc, there are suitable pathways that they can find. Well, let's just plow. I want to get into the material because I know we're getting into the back end of our time.
So two old men, chatting about the world. So I've teased us about you. I've teased my wife and my kids about we're like going to be the two old men in the Muppets.
I love that.
Complaining about the show, giving our commentary, and but you know what? Everybody knows them. Everybody watches them, and it's a. So I'm like, okay, we could be that, but I do think that we don't have necessarily hip to offer, but we do have wisdom. We've been doing this, and we have made lots of mistakes.
Oh, my soul!
And maybe that's.
Can I just add one little trinket there? Yeah. I know we have to go on. I have such a heart for pastors. You know this. I was a pastor a long time, Doc. There's so many men and women that are leaving the universe of church leadership because they literally feel like they are on an island and starving and thirsty. I hope that our message gets to them and they see that, if they don't have the right smog machine or fog machine or whatever all the other gadgets are, but if they can institute healing in a proper way into their community, I believe God will bless that congregation, Doc.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe that can be something that, there's always been a place for the large cathedral, and there's always a place for the small country church, a one-room church house.
Yeah.
And maybe that will enliven sometimes leaders to realize that both places can be equally valuable, and we need them. And if you look throughout church history, you're going to discover that they always both exist.
They coexisted, didn't they?
And they actually supported one another unintentionally, I think, which it's God's intention. That's the Holy Spirit. But I do think that's always been how it has existed.
Well, let's try to get through our 7 pieces. I want folks to know these
7 things.
If we can get through this, then I think we'll have done our job today.
So the 7 that we've gone through a lot so far, don't you think?
I love it. I love the fact that we have been able to introduce who we are, and I also think it's really cool that we're creating this ongoing series of conversations that have learning attached to it, and inspiration, and conversations that spark internal renewal, and renewal, Doc, that gives folks the capacity and the will to try again. If there's anything that collision does, is it saps energy. And I pray that if we infuse anything into people's lives, it's the notion that God has not forgotten them, doesn't forget their zip code, doesn't forget their address, and despite the way it makes them feel or look from appearance, that there are some practical steps they can take to begin to renew and try again. And we're going to talk through those now, I hope.
Yeah. So we put together these 7 non-negotiable guiding paths, or kind of like pillars of how we think about healing.
Yeah.
And I think and getting well. Maybe that's a better, broader way to say it. Getting well. And I think we chose those. Honestly, I don't really know why we chose those. That's probably a question. Why do we choose those?
Because I think this is how we build our work. When people who come to us have experienced the collision, when they've hit a pylon dock at high speed, or their family's in the midst of the murkiest delta that they've ever been able to encounter, and Doc, that is so prevalent now, I want them to know that there are some practical, I loved your idea, there's some practical steps that they can begin to take that bring, I think, rays and of hope and essence. And I want to talk through them because I think they have value.
I was sitting here thinking about what, you said you wanted to have these 7 non-negotiables, and, and I was giving you that's a good idea. What exactly is it? Response. And we talked about them and we kind of worked through them. And when I look at them now, I think what emerges from it is, like, regardless of the shape that any particular healing journey will take, and what I mean by that, whether or not you're going to psychotherapy, you're seeing a biblical counselor, you're going to groups, you're reading self-help books, you're going to church, and all the things that might be the form in which getting well becomes, you'll always see these 7 things.
I don't think there's any doubt that is true.
They might look a little bit different, but they'll always be here.
I liked your word form. They will always be here in form. Go on.
So I'm just going to, how this meets what I just said: session work, the idea of spending time, encouraging personal development, this idea that there is this quest of becoming a better human being, that is a part of everything. If you don't have that quest, if you're not on the quest, if you just want to be satisfied with who you are, and the trouble in which that you live, then things don't get better. You leaning into the future me, that God is always making us into something more. The New Testament says we're being conformed to the image of Jesus. There's this progressive growth. I mean, I hear people make fun of Christian radio, and I love Christian radio. It kind of upsets me when they make fun of it.
Okay.
But I understand their point. You go on there, and every song is about, has the same kind of pattern.
It certainly does.
I'm miserable, I've made mistakes, God loves me, I get better. And so, it's the recognition of the frailty of humanity, the sinful nature of humanity, the pain of the human experience, and there's always this redemptive arc. And it's just over and over and over again. And the redemptive arc doesn't get you better so that you can be back where you were. It gets you better so that you can be different. And so the redeeming element is always forward moving. So this idea of looking at future me. So resisting culture, at some point we all have to come to face the reality that we have to stop. So there's just 4 of the 7, but that's where you see this, regardless of whether I'm sitting in a counselor's office, I'm going to have to figure out something I'm going to have to stop. And I'm going to have to say no to. And I think lately we've been talking a lot about enough is enough. Whether I'm sitting in a counselor or sitting in my couch reading a book and learning about life and truth and God and myself, what am I becoming? What's my purpose in life? Where am I going? How am I going to invest in that? Where do I find the energy and the resource? and that requires time. So those are the first four right off the bat. All can be expressed in different form, but they have that passion, that core thing. So I think that's where these 7 non-negotiables. You're not going to get better if you're not doing this in some way or another.
100% true, Doc. In session, you made fun of me about, in a good way. I love the way you poke at me, and I deserve it most days. But you've poked at me about session. But to me, session is the essence of life. If you're not involved in session, I loved when you said that you gave like several examples of how that might look, but it could look all kinds of different ways. But the piece that we want people to know is it has to be absolutely specific and topical, and it's got to be directed, and it's got to be agreed upon, and it's got to be intentional. And we want them to be involved in some kind of session work. And the next thing I'll say is this can be their session work, Doc. This can be the thing that if they don't have money and time and all the objections, they still drive in their car. They still have to go places. They still, sit in the back of their van going somewhere with their earbuds in. This can be a session for them because the illumination and the learning that they're going to receive is going to be quite remarkable. I believe that. So the next thing is
Let me stop
please.
there because it's pinging inside of me.
I love that.
I remember when we first started working together, in the agency that we both work in, and they were like, "What is?" Steve's always talking about this session stuff. What is this session stuff? I said, and I'm finally like, "You're hearing it as mean you have to sit down for an hour of therapy. Mm-hmm. That is not what he means. He means any concentrated time.
It's true,
and it can be done in very many places." Sometimes just your prayer, your morning prayer is time in session. It's just concentrated, slowing down, stopping. When we work with students together, you're always advocating for this slow down, stop. You need to be able to have some moments to just listen, think, meditate. If we drew from the Proverbs, it would be this idea that, night and day I meditate on your precepts.
Yeah.
And I add precept upon precept upon precept. Yeah. That whole Old Testament idea that you're thinking and meditating. So you're pausing and making this part of your day. So here's the ping in me. TikTok and rapid content.
Yeah.
That is, it's not slow, it's abrasive.
I agree.
It's sometimes it's again just designed to incite, but even when it does have content, it's like hitting you over the head. So you are almost recovering psychologically, physiologically, emotionally, intellectually. You're recovering from being hit, and then it doesn't allow it to sink in. So all you have is a response to it rather than a consideration of it.
If we can, you're so on point. And then if you think about the constant verbiage that's thrown at people, and I don't want to go into it, but I love what you're saying, Doc, and that's why I said this is session. Mm-hmm. There are people that will be driving. There are people that will be making dinner. There will be people that might use this as instructional thing for their staff, because you're right. This ability to stop, and I do say those words, and I say them often. And what I love, Doc, is that the staff, as you know, have picked them up, and the students sometimes reflect that you and I serve, and sometimes the families. But the point is, I believe that this intelligent stopping, this pausing, this allowing this calmative, curative thing to flow into life, I think there's a massive audience for that, Doc. I believe that.
Well, there's a hunger for it. I would think. I think we get tired of being bombarded, even though we're kind of addicted to pick up our phones and just take snippet after snippet after snippet. I mean, I went on vacation, and I decided, I'm going to look at some shorts because, they have those people driving off the cliffs and all that stuff like that. And I would spend I could spend 3 hours and I don't remember anything I really saw. I'm exhausted. I have this exhaustion about myself, and I have actually consumed massive amounts of data. I don't know where it went in my head. I'm afraid of when it might come out. And so this bombardment of information and the way it's delivered in that rapid fire, it might be appealing, but is it effective? This is the question they had to ask about Sesame Street, an electric company, a couple decades ago. They went and decided that they were going to put academic learning for young children at the attention span. So it was rapid, boom, boom, boom. Segments changed quickly. Everything was fast, as opposed to Mr. Rogers, which was slow. All right. What they discovered was, not all of that rapid fire was actually effective. It might have held their attention. They might have laughed, but they didn't always learn. And I'm not saying they didn't learn anything from Sesame Street. I'm saying that it wasn't necessarily positive. It may have actually shortened the attention span. And what happens when our attention span shortens and we have to deal with a concept that is quite complicated, or a problem that is very nuanced, or where we have to find a solution that takes multiple components or multiple steps, and we're used to attention spans that are so short that we don't give it the time. Versus a Mr. Rogers, where you're going to sit and we're going to watch him take his shoes off for the first 5 minutes of the show, as he sings us a song. But there's a sense of, I think there's an openness, and let's take time to really ask the questions. In this short, rapid fire delivery of data, I do not think they have an ability they don't have a space to respond except to react.